So we were joking before I turned the recorder on that neither one of us is sweaty enough to be talking about this movie. And I know in West Texas it's getting warm, and in my neck of the woods it's getting warm as well. But some of the things I read online about this movie are it's the sweatiest sci-fi movie ever made. The sweatiest post-apocalyptic movie ever made. I don't know how I feel about that. That feels like a very hyperbolic statement to make, but Charlton Heston does look proper sweaty throughout this movie, so...
Yeah, Charlton Heston, for those of you who are not Charlton Heston fans or just didn't happen to watch a lot of his movies, he was famously a very physical actor. I mean, I personally feel he was a very good actor. He had a great voice. He had a great charismatic presence. He was the star of so many movies, especially genre movies, but he also was a very physically fit guy. And so in any movie he's in, at some point he probably would take his shirt off and
Right.
he would do some stunts. And probably his most famous film is Ben-Hur, where he does the most famous special, not special effects, like real effects ever done, which is the chariot race probably the best action scene in the history of movies. So pretty much anything Charlton Heston was in, he would move around and look terrific. And we can't live up to that. I'm sorry, Chris. I'm just going to go out and say that right now. Even just audio only, people should be disappointed in us compared to Chuck Heston.
We don't have that stoicism that he brings to all of his roles, that American brand of stoicism. So if you're just tuning in, this is the Culture Cast, and I am still your host, Chris Stachiw, much to the chagrin of many. And I am joined by a friend of mine. He's never been on the show before, but he deals with the media and communication world. He is the Dean and Professor of the Texas Tech College of Media and Communications. My friend, soon to be yours, Professor Dr. I assume, Dr. David D. Perlmutter.
Thank you very much. I know that sounds like a supervillain name, but I'm a pretty nice guy. I do have a white cat on my lap, though, as we're doing this. And I've tried to install some trap doors in my office, but HR said we couldn't do it, so I don't.
Those hounds are too expensive to feed, is what I've been told. Right. So for those of my listeners in the audience that may not know Texas Tech or the program that you guys have out at Texas Tech, if someone were to enroll in Texas Tech or go to see what you guys are up to at Texas Tech, because again, I technically almost went to Tech twice for law school and for undergrad. I lived in Dallas, so I'm familiar with Texas Tech, as it were. But for the listeners at large who aren't, tell us a little bit about what are you guys doing out there at the Media and Communications program at Texas Tech? Sure.
Texas Tech University is a big public university. We've more than 40,000 students and every possible major you can think of, from mechanical engineering to law and medical schools and so on. We are the College of Media and Communication, and we have about 2,700 students, undergraduate, master's, PhD. We study and teach pretty much anything you can think of under the label of media and communication. For example, if you visit us, you will probably notice our new gaming lab. We have 5 faculty who teach about gaming and world building within the gaming space. We have faculty who teach AI communication and analytics. So we cover a lot of, we like to say we cover the latest and the greatest, but you will also be forced to learn how to write and how to speak in public. So we also say we cover the tried and the true, the sort of skills in a communication program several thousand years ago that you would probably have to learn. So we're proud that we try to deal with all the areas of communication, but genre, science fiction, horror, apocalyptic fiction. We teach movie making, television creation. Quite a number of our graduates end up in the audio world, like podcasting is a big new career area. And traditionally, they've gone to Hollywood and New York and other places to make movies and TV shows and documentaries and photography. So we like to think we do a lot everywhere in the world of media. And we're very, very interested in popular culture, especially in this era of social media.
Well, and I mean, hey, as we like to say at Weirding Way Media, if you want to talk about something and people want to listen, there's few better platforms than the podcasting space. It's still the Wild West of multimedia because there's no regulations. and everybody can just kind of stake their own claim on the land, which is, I mean, yes, that exists with video, but the barrier to entry is so much lower with podcasts that like the basic knowledge is needed to make a podcast. And like compared to like a video anything, it's like that's like 10x. So hey, let's do the audio thing. let's do the audio thing. Let's do the audio thing. Because for me, that's why we're here.
I almost completely agree with you. Let me just say 99% agree with you. Here in West Texas, the traditional industries have been ranching, oil, and farming. And people have made good livings in all three of those, obviously. But I think podcasting, maybe the analogy I like to use to our students is it's a little less like staking a claim in farming and more like oil. Like to be a very successful podcaster, and by the way, I think one of the reasons I'm so honored to be here is that you have written, I would say written a book, but like written a digital manual on how to do a great podcast in terms of quality and also reaching an audience. But that's the tough part, right? Like anybody can start a podcast, anybody can drill a hole in the ground, but actually finding oil, that's tougher. And I want to congratulate you. And that's certainly what we try to teach our students is that you got to have something that's distinctive and makes you more successful than just somebody who's putting words up in the air.
Which, hey, there are a lot of those people. there are a lot of them. So, hey, and God be with them, because at one point I was one of them. That's the way I look at it. I mean, I went to the University of Missouri for journalism, didn't graduate from the University of Missouri with journalism, but that's okay. So I was down the path of so many people that are probably in the same sphere as the people that you're teaching and dealing with. So I'm just excited to hear that podcasting is getting its due. That's all I care about. That's all I really care about. Because 10 years ago, if you said podcasting, what? Now it's like podcast. Oh, I get it. I got it. It's a little less of a and more of a like internet radio. So
your mother is willing to believe that you actually do this for a living. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
That's the final test of anything.
Right.
Is that parents. I mean, I'm old enough to remember that famous Far Side cartoon strip where a kid is dreaming about making a living playing video games and his parents are sadly delusional. That's silly. How could anybody make a living video games? But of course now it's the largest media industry.
Right.
So if you wait long enough and you work hard enough, things come around to success, I hope.
Yeah. And hey, from what I've heard, the cost per 1,000 views on video game media is the most expensive sphere to get into in terms of reaching an audience is the male-driven technology sphere, unlike the female-driven true crime sphere. So there you go, folks. But hey, speaking of things that take our mind off of the ever-approaching apocalypse, which is on the horizon, folks, because, hey, that's all we're just spinning our wheels here until the end comes, really. We're going to be talking about a movie that, David, you wanted to talk about, that you brought to me, and you were like, hey, I want to talk about this. And I was like, cool, I haven't seen this movie in a decade plus. So, on this episode of the Culture Cast, we are going to be talking about 1973's movie that feels a little bit more prescient than it used to, Soylent Green.
What is the secret of Soylent Green? New York City, in the year 2022. Nothing runs anymore. Nothing works. But the people are the same, and the people will do anything to get what they need.
This is the police.
What they need most is Soylent Green.
The supply of Soylent Green has been exhausted. Return to your home.
What is the secret of Soylent Green? Detective Sergeant Thorne. He has a 2-year backlog of unsolved murders. Now he's on a case that must be solved. Saul Roth, Thorne's private library.
Hey, Saul.
A living book in a world without books.
Have some pencils, courtesy of your next assignment. William R. Simonson.
Simonson. He was the first to learn the secret of Soylent Green.
They told me to say that they were sorry, but that you had become unreliable.
Saul Roth was the next to know.
How do we come to this?
And he chose to die rather than reveal the secret of Soylent Green. What is the secret of Soylent Green?
Why did you set up Simonson?
I didn't. Cheryl.
Let's see your hands.
Officially, she's furniture. She comes with the apartment. She belongs to the tenant.
How many times you been in trouble with the police, Cheryl?
Never.
Can't hear you.
Never.
Captain Hatcher. First, he wanted this case solved.
Simonson, what do you say?
It was an assassination.
Now, he just wants it
Who
closed.
bought you? High and hot, and they want this case closed permanently. Their way. Now, you sign this.
You sign it!
Dorn refuses to close the Simonson case.
Just do what you have to do. Where did you go with Simonson?
He took me to church.
Church.
Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It has been 6 months since my last confession.
Charlton Heston, Edward G. Robinson, Chuck Connors, Lee Taylor Young, Brock Peters, Paula Kelly, and Joseph Cotton fight for survival and try to solve the most bizarre riddle ever to face mankind. The search for the secret of Soylent Green. You will find out why Soylent Green means life. You will find out why Soylent Green means death.
We gotta stop him!
What is the secret of Soylent Green?
Please!
So the film is directed by Richard Fleischer. It is based on a screenplay by Stanley R. Greenberg, based on a book, Make Room by Harry Harrison, who writes a great book about a stainless steel rat. If you've never read them, they're great. Make Room is very different than Soylent Green, which is the movie version of it. This film does star, like we've kind of mentioned, the burly, brawny man himself, Charlton Heston, Leah Taylor-Young, Chuck Connors, who played a werewolf at one point, and Edward G. Robinson's final screen role. And the film is all about Charlton Heston, who is a cop in 2022 New York, which is overcrowded, and he has to figure out who murdered the head of the Soylent Corporation, a company that makes food, the only food seemingly for everybody to eat. It's a little weird that there's a company called Soylent now, given the ramifications of what the twist of this movie is, but hey, I'm sure we'll talk about it. So before I give my thoughts, David, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. Why do you want to talk about Soylent Green? I feel like that might be an obvious answer, but when did you see it the first time? What did you think then? And if it wasn't that time and you're watching it for the first time now, which is impossible, what do you think now?
Well, that's a really good way to frame it. I was just reading a discussion on Reddit, Science Fiction or Print SF, where they were talking about what movie or book did you see when you were a kid that you thought was like super cool, and now you think, oh my God, that's cringy, and like, oh my God, oh wow, racial stereotypes, gender stereotypes, and so on. Soylent Green is a great example of like, it matters when you've watched it, because at the time, I think if you look at the reviews of Soylent Green, like in the 70s, people call it like an okay science fiction apocalyptic movie starring Charlton Heston, in his usual role as the one honest cop in the future, or the one honest soldier, or one honest scientist, whatever. And the world is falling apart, but, he stands tall. And they didn't really say much else. It was like, oh, yeah, overpopulation, some nice special effects, some nice practical effects. But and I watched it as a kid. I mean, literally, I remember vaguely, maybe that's too long ago, going to a movie theater with some of my friends and watching this in a theater. And it was really a great experience at the time. And certainly to my ex-teen-year-old self, that was like, hey, that's fun. Like, that was a great movie. I enjoyed myself, and things, there was action and oh my God, Soylent Green is, and I guess we're okay with spoilers, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, 10 years is normally what I give. That's the statute of limitation on spoilers for this show is a decade. So we're good. And I also think, just to butt in for a moment, I think this is one of the twists that like everybody knows at this point. Like this is for a certain generation, like the what's in the box or Luke, no, I am your father. Like this is like that level, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I think somebody must have written some 10 best surprises in movies or something that you think about The Sixth Sense. Oh, he's really dead. All the time he's been dead. Well, Soylent Green, it's made of people, even people who have not watched the movie. They've seen a short YouTube video or somebody's referred to it in an apocalyptic podcast. It's probably impossible to have lived in our culture and not know the surprise ending of Soylent Green, even if you don't know the movie much.
I kind of almost to the point where I go, the characters in the fucking movie should have known Soylent Green was being made out of people. I felt like at one point in the movie when I was watching it, I was like, I don't know what else it could be, guys, if it's not what they're saying it is. I don't know. Well, I mean, that was,
and of course,
just me though.
The interesting flip here is that in the book, it's not right. I remember this is my teenage self, my friends and I who shockingly were not given a radio show at that time to do an analysis critique. But in our McDonald's critique after watching the movie, there were two things that we remarked on. One was they should have called it Soylent Red to make it more menacing, like it should have red blood and things like that. We thought that would be gorier, so our teenage selves felt that way. So green was like a positive color, like everything. I remember at that time, the word green was really being introduced as like, we want to go green and like the environment and so on. So it was more of a surprise and actually good marketing that if you're going to sell cannibalism, you don't call it cannibalism.
Right,
you don't call it Soylent Bloody Red, or Soylent Hemoglobin or something like that. Now, of course, we have these Beyond Burgers and they're actually selling the red part, that it has like some... I don't know how they make them, but there's something like blood cells or something to give it the taste. I've never actually had one. But anyway, so we thought Soylent Green was a much better title. We'd all read the book. In our group, we always read the book before we went to the movie. And there is no connect. In fact, that was our second question in at the time of the movie was like, why did they bother purchasing the rights to the book? Because there is very little connection. I mean, just like it's set in New York City, and there's overcrowding, and one of the main characters is a police officer, but in the book, he's just one of some other characters. You spend dozens and dozens of pages following the lives of other characters. So there is very little connection between the two, but we did think for us, it was a surprise. Remember, there's no internet. There's no like anybody spoiling. There's no spoilers. I didn't think the concept of spoilers existed, because you went to see the movie right away so that you wouldn't have to be spoiled, right? Like that was the big deal in high school. It's like you go see the movie or middle school. So you wouldn't have somebody at your lunch cafeteria say, hey, did you see that movie where it's people? You wouldn't want to have that happen. So we were surprised at some point. I forgot whether it was at the end or not.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, it is kind of, you mentioned kind of, it's hard to watch. It is hard to watch this movie in a vacuum because we all know now what the twist is. Anybody who sits down to watch this movie is going to know, I feel like, what the twist. I feel like it would be impossible. Maybe if you are part of the, Hutu tribe in Africa somewhere and you've never heard of this, but like, I just feel like the level of cultural kind of, I don't know, the level that it permeated in the 70s was pretty big. I mean, it's part of that zeitgeist to the point where like I mentioned, there's a company called Soylent now that they're called that for a reason. They're called that because of this, unironically or ironically, however the hell they want to spin it. But it's a movie that, I saw it. I want to say I saw it in the mid 2000s, and I didn't get it. I mean, I got it in as much as like, Soylent Green is people, and whatever. But rewatching it now, like you could take this and put this next to Idiocracy, and that's like a good 1A and 1B of like hey, this is the future as one person saw it, and Idiocracy, and it's like our world isn't going to be either one. It's kind of going to be both. It's going to be this like very weird middle ground of the two, as we're seeing now in reality. I mean, we don't want to get overly political here, but as much as we can, like realistically, what's going on in this movie is overcrowding, overpopulation, destruction of the environment, possibly climate change, all things that we are actually seeing now. So, like, how do you not address that in some substantive way? Like, that's the problem. It's almost impossible to watch this movie without thinking about the ramifications of reality, because we're seeing it right now.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point for anybody who's going back and watching quote unquote old movies is, yeah, we always have to think about the context of the times. But another question to ask is the context of our times. Like some movies, I was rewatching Casablanca about a couple of weeks ago because I had to show an excerpt in class to talk about something. And I would say Casablanca still should be on the top 10 list of movies ever made, like just a beautiful, fantastic movie. But there are some parts now which I just would not show a modern audience. They're just too horrible, right, racist and sexist. And I don't know how I feel about editing classics, but I do feel like putting a big warning, like, oh, you know, this was not the 1940s, and this, you know, this is the way people talk to each other. So Soylent Green, in some ways, I don't know if it's the opposite, but like you said, you saw it in the early 2000s, it has gotten a big push because we live in an era where some of the scenes there of a lot of people sweaty and hot and like, crowded and like hungry and rioting and pushing each other. Some of these things look eerily close to the 2022 that it was actually set in. Right. So I think it's sort of had a comeback, whereas in the 70s it was considered an average, okay genre film, and then probably by 2000 maybe you saw it as a little dated, some nice elements, but oh my gosh, I've seen the plot of overcrowding and environmental disaster 50 times already. But I think it wears much, I mean, this is not a good thing, but it looks better today than it did in 2002 or 1992. And that's not good news for us. That an apocalyptic film feels closer to today than it does to yesterday.
Well, and that's the other thing about the movie. I think it works on like a literal level, right? Of like people being turned into food, right? Like the literalism of overpopulation is solved through the consumption of the of the population. The people that are deemed, you know, whatever, I guess, unruly, unneeded, however they deem the old people in this movie, which is its own conversation in and of itself. But I think it works on the literal level of like, you know, people eating one another, but I think it also works on kind of a more metatextual level of the way the kind of post-industrialist capitalism of our country eats people up and spits them out. Because I think you could look at it, I mean, it's technically the same, but instead of talking about the literal consumption of people as in people eating them, but more the system chewing you up and spitting you out when it's done with you, the way it does with so many of the characters in this movie, namely Edward G. Robinson and all of the kind of the books, or, you know, the Supreme Exchange, the people that are kind of sitting in the back that don't have a place in the world anymore and are seemingly waiting for reasons to not walk into the sanatorium and kill themselves. And it's like, I think it works on a double level. And I think the metatextual nature of the movie, I think maybe it was always there, but I think it makes more sense now. And it can be looked at kind of more at a 100-yard view. And I think it's like the 1,000-yard view is the cannibalism thing, right? Like it's on the nose to the point where they literally made it people eating people. But I think that there's a more interesting message here about the way our capitalist society treats people like resources. And when we're done with them, we just kick them out. But also we're trying to create more resources at the same time because, you know, overpopulation. They don't say anything about giving out contraceptives at any point or anything. They're seemingly okay with the overpopulation being a problem. I don't. If it were really that big of a deal, they'd be getting more people off the street, I guess.
I think it was a time where everybody agreed that overpopulation was a problem. There wasn't like we're going to go back to the context of the time where there was a lot of discussion in the early 70s about overpopulation. let's talk about the people themselves as being a character, because you've had this discussion on CultureCast before about villains who sort of had a point.
Right.
And interestingly, in this film, the bad guys sort of have a point. I mean, if the world has run out of food, what is the alternative, right? Like, I mean, okay, Charlton Heston throughout the entire film. Now, hear me. This is one of those hear me out things. You can argue he's a villain, and the evil corporation are the good guys. And just hear me out, because what exactly at this point? I mean, New York has 80 million people, right? The world is super overcrowded. At this point, what exactly are humanity's options? Because remember, in the film, they say the oceans are dead, because Soylent used to be made from algae or like vegetation or something like
plankton,
that.
Plankton, I believe they say specifically.
Lentils and soy, right? But plankton, yeah. Well, we're told, and maybe they're lying to us, I mean, who knows? But in the film narrative, we're told game over. So you're in charge of the world. What do? Do you tell people like, okay, everybody, it looks like we're all going to be starving to death. Everybody, good luck, signing off for tomorrow, or the last ditch hope is cannibalism. Now, obviously, that's a hard message to sell, but you see my point where the supervillains, it's not like they're imposing this on humanity. Now, of course, you can blame them for helping get us to this point, right? I mean, I'm not going to defend capitalism. I actually am a capitalist myself, earning money and all that, but I think socialism, like the industrial style socialism, spits people out too. But the question is, it's a film about a point of no return, because cannibalism, right? Where do people practice cannibalism in modern society? Like you're shipwrecked, or like you've got no other choice, right?
Right.
Like you're at the Donner Party, right? Or you're like starving Leningrad for 900 days.
In the Andes, like,
yeah, exactly.
It's never mentioned in like I did it because I had a choice that I didn't want to take. It's always I literally have no fucking choice here. Would you like for me to just die? Like,
yeah, I mean, nobody says, well, Trader Vic's was closed, and so I just had to, do something.
Right, like it's never like it's not a push comes to shove. It's like a push comes to shove 10 times over. And now you're literally staring at a frozen foot going, should I eat this? Like, again, like I wonder what I would do in that scenario. I believe that self-preservation wins out in the end. Because again, like you said, like that's where they are in this movie. I mean, the mayor, the governor, and the mayor are all in on it. I mean, they all know that, the mayor knows. At one point, he's effectively like condoning what's going on, and he's asking for, the Chuck Connor's character to go and kill Charlton Heston, like stop him from finding out the truth, because otherwise our tenuous equilibrium will be upsetted. Like, and you can't have that, because you saw what happened in the scene where they start rioting and they can barely control them there. Imagine if everybody started rioting.
Yes. And so again, in the book, since there isn't this central plot, it's people, the murder investigation, which does exist in the book, is sort of, it's just a detective in a future crowded New York, and it turns out to be some gangland thing. So I definitely think Soylent Green, the movie, is a lot more interesting than the book. I mean, I can imagine seeing this movie, and I have seen this movie more than once. Harry Harrison was a great writer. I know we're going to talk about him. But this was not one of his great novels that like you can read 10 times or something like that. It was pretty just one idea. Like, in the future, it's really crowded and hot, and the environment has collapsed, which again, in the 1970s, if you Google Club of Rome, there's a famous report by, today we talk about Davos, where people go and these billionaires talk about how, we've got to cut back the little people.
Right.
They fly there in their private jet and talk about how, Chris, you need to stop going to the grocery store so often to buy Soylent Green,
Yeah, stop eating your avocado toast.
Yeah, it's all our fault. But at the time, there was a lot of high-end United Nations, Congress, academic. We're going to talk about the character, Edward G. Robinson character, who is a former professor. A lot of discussion about the Malthusian hypothesis seen in modern days. For those of you who've heard that before, Malthus was a famous student of society. I guess he'd call himself an economist, maybe, but he postulated a long time ago, hundreds of years ago, that human beings would always outbreed their resources, right? And famously, we've kept putting that off. Like mass starvation, for example, has been predicted over and over again, but we've kept improving industrial. I mean, this is the sort of sad thing, right? Is we say, oh, horrible industrial society, but like if we didn't have industrial agriculture, we would have mass starvation. If everybody was like lived off their organic garden, you'd have billions of people starving, right? So at that time in the 1970s, the zeitgeist was doom and gloom, apocalypse, and you just choose your apocalypse. And of course, Harry Harrison wrote about a couple of different apocalypses in his work, but Charlton Heston was the star for the if you were having an apocalyptic film, he was your A-list star to be in it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, Omega Man, Planet of the Apes, and this is like, that's the three kind of the biggies. And it's like, he's front and center in all three. Like I would almost say that like this movie lives and dies by the Heston performance because he's so front and center. And I mean, Edward G. Robinson is good, but he's such a minor part of the movie almost. And I kind of forgot how minor of a part he ends up being. I thought he was in the movie more than he was, but it ends up being like effectively a handful of scenes. But he's great in the movie. But it is like, again, like you just mentioned, like if you're going to do this kind of movie in the 70s, you need to get Charlton Heston. There's nobody better.
Yes. Let's talk a little bit about the minor characters, if we could, because they all and we can talk about the people of New York or any city USA are a character, but maybe because I'm an old professor, I like old professor characters in movies, and Saul Roth, Jewish old professor, hits too close to home here, is a character in the movie, and in the movie and in the book, there's probably more similarity between those two characters than any other character. He is sort of the sidekick for the police officer played by Charlton Heston. What's interesting to me in the movie, and let's focus on that, is that Saul Roth represents everything that was lost in this apocalypse, right? Like he loves books and he loves nature and he loves good food that isn't a brick of something horrible, even if it isn't people. And he's the old guy who says, yeah, in my day, everything was wonderful. And that can be really irritating, but it's a testament to his role and his acting ability that he's not irritating. But in the movie, nobody pays attention to him. Even Charlton Heston, who loves him. I mean, physically, this is an old guy that is my best friend and I trust, and he lives with me. He pretty much ignores Saul. Whenever Saul starts talking about the good old days, he just, okay, I appreciate it, but, let's move on. So the saddest part about this is not only have we lost all these aspects of living a decent life as a human, but like, so few people remember them that they're not almost missing. That people don't even know what they're missing anymore, which is even sadder than not having them.
Right. Well, and I think it's also kind of interesting because you mentioned, obviously the Saul Roth character is an older character, which I think not unintentional, obviously, because that plays into also the kind of the theme of feeling out of place. Because again, like you've mentioned, he has no place in this society, seemingly. Like, society has no use for him anymore, outside of what we know to be the thing that's going on in the background. Because again, like the Soylent thing in the movie, it's kind of just there. It's just there. It's just ever present until Heston goes and sees what's going on. But you just kind of see Soylent kind of hangs over everybody's head as like, this is a thing that's happening. This is how people are being fed. They keep mentioning the food and stuff. But the idea that Edward G. Robinson's character feels so out of place in the world, and the world has no place for him, either partially because he remembers a world that he wishes still existed, but also it's this idea, and again, it's a thing that exists in reality of like, at some point there became this idea that like older people serve no use to society anymore and they don't add anything. And so put him in a old folks home, a convalescence home, and let's not think about them. And like, in some ways when we're talking about like politics and stuff, and it's like, you're an 80-year-old person making rules for the rest of us, maybe you don't need to be doing that job anymore. But specifically in regards to like people of an older age, like that is something that I know people of an older age struggle with, is like feeling like the world has passed them by or they don't have a place in it anymore. And I think it's interesting because this movie just goes, well, if that's the case, go kill yourself. go kill yourself is what Soylent's essentially saying
for a long time. I mean, I think, I'm not quite as old yet as the Edward G. Robinson character, Saul Roth, in the movie, but I can tell you, and I'm sure you've had this discussion with maybe some older people in your life, the biggest fear is not death. The biggest fear is irrelevance. It's like nobody cares
being forgotten
about you or what you've done or what you think on anything. And you can meet some people in nursing homes who, they don't hate the idea of death. They hate the idea of like nobody cares anymore. Right. And that boy, he is the ultimate sympathetic character for that, because even the one person in the world who loves him, the Charlton Heston character, cares about him as a person, but really doesn't value that much any of his memories of yesteryear.
Right. To the point where Saul Roth finds to be the only way and again, like this is my read on it. It feels like the only way he can get Charlton Heston's attention is to go and do what he ends up doing. And like hoping that he finds the note and comes and finds him. Because like, I can't imagine that the character was going to the thanatorium without hoping that Charlton Heston would show up. Otherwise, he wouldn't have left the note. But it's that same idea of like, I have to do something drastic to get your attention. And so I'm going to go and get Dick Van Patten to lead me to the back room of the thanatorium, which there's nothing Dick Van Patten can ever do to hide his voice in a role and what he looks like. When I heard his voice, I was like, hey, it's Dick Van Patten. And like the most random thing I've seen him in. It's like, okay, hi, Dick Van Patten. But it has that like idea of like, I'm going to have to escalate to the point where like I have to make it clear to you that I'm kind of done here. And like, if you're interested in finding out any more, like you're going to have to chase after me, but I've given you plenty of opportunities to listen and you haven't. So, and that like the realization of what Soylent is pushes him over the edge. At least that's my interpretation of the movie, is that the secret of Soylent is so horrifying. It drives people to go mad. It's like, it's like a Lovecraft story, right? In a little bit of a way. Like it's, it makes you go crazy.
Absolutely. And we remember that the person who's murdered, who sort of sets off the plot in Mechanism, is an older man. He's sad, and he's actually welcoming death. When Chuck Connors comes to murder him, he actually says to Chuck Connors, okay, I expected this, just go ahead and kill me, basically.
Right.
So there's a parallel there with the Saul Roth character of, it's very interesting. You really put it well. We often talk about the Cthulhu mythos and sort of the ultimate evil, the evil that's so gigantic that we can't even describe it in language.
Unfathomable mentally.
Yeah, unfathomable evil. And that's what I always thought both these older characters, who I think there was a strong parallel set up between them, the one of the executives of the Soylent Corporation, who just can't take it. Like he can't be part of this anymore. And he knows this horrible truth and he just wants to die. And of course, Saul Roth also knows this horrible truth. And I think he is suicidal. I think he just wants to, he doesn't want to be part of this world anymore, but he wants to do his last duty to Charlton Heston, his friend and his employer. Working with him for the police, by telling him the truth and then letting him decide. Neither of them want to be the whistleblower themselves. That's interesting, right? It's an unfathomable truth that they can only share with a few people, maybe one, or they just give up. It's so horrible. And we don't see that very often in horror movies, where it's that Lovecraft level 10 or 11 of horror where people just give up.
So what does that mean then? The movie, the way the movie presents it then, right? Like what is the movie saying about the idea of eating people? Like that some people, even though they know it's an unfathomable thing, will understand the need for it? Because that's the thing. I mean, the character of Simonson, I think that's maybe where he would be coming from, as this idea of like, hey, I am one pillar of this that is, I understand that this is horrible and horrifying and people are literally being taken off the streets against their will and put into unmarked vans. Oh, wait, no, that didn't happen in the movie. That happened in real life, but it did happen in the movie. Those things just had giant scoops on them. or is Simonson, I guess, is okay making that decision and allowing it to happen. But in a lot of ways, so is Saul Roth. Because, like, he doesn't go and scream it from the mountaintop. He goes and, after finding out this horrible piece of information, just goes and kills himself. So it's like the two pillars are, I either know the truth and it's so unfathomable that I have to check out, or I know the truth and it's so unfathomable, but it's a means to an end. And I feel like Saul Roth even knows it's a means to an end. It's just he can't support it. And he also knows, like, any longer that he lives, he's going to have to eat Soylent too, which maybe is also part of it. Like, I'm checking out because I don't want to eat Soylent, which would be, I think, like the most base level of interpretations. But also you could just say, like, well, he just don't want to eat people. So, like, you know, also that's the dumb podcast interpretation of it. He just doesn't like eating people. Okay, let's move on.
So it's 44 minutes into our discussion, so it's time to bring in Hitler.
I mean, all right, as long as you can land this, I'm interested.
Todd, again, maybe one of the benefits of being older is just sort of remember the intellectual zeitgeist and the cultural zeitgeist of when the movie came out. One of the other sort of philosophical discussions that started out in academia with Hannah Arendt, famous philosopher, that became super popular was the idea of the banality of evil. And she got this concept watching the trial of Adolf Eichmann, who was one of the architects and bureaucrats of the extermination attempt of the Jews of Europe by the Nazis. And she felt that he was, in a word, this just colorless bureaucrat who was just really good at his job. And if he had been put in charge of, Walmart delivery of paper bags, he would have been good at that too, but he didn't mind sending people to mass death.
Right.
And so there was a lot of discussion then about corporations, governments, what will people do that is under the classification of evil and just be part of the machine. Now, I want to say that, some discussion has changed in that time, and the banality of evil is sort of out as a concept, because in the case of Eichmann himself, more recent scholars have pointed out he was an actual diehard Nazi. He wasn't just like a bureaucrat who was assigned to do this and didn't care. So is banality, is evil banal, or does it have a strong, like, charismatic and like excited, dedicated component? But the point was that the people in the Soylent Corporation, the people in the political structure, the police structure, are all of them evil because they participate in this? I go back to the idea that, like, yeah, you can blame them. Maybe there's an analogy here to the movie WALL-E, right? Like in the time of WALL-E, like, it's all over.
Right.
For Earth,
people have
right?
left.
Yeah. So it's not like you can install a solution. Finally, WALL-E does participate in the solution. But in a lot of apocalyptic movies, I'm thinking of like Roland Emmerich. And by the way, there's an interesting I'm going to go off on a tangent here. This is what I do.
I like a Roland Emmerich tangent as much as anybody.
Let's go to Roland Emmerich world for a minute. And The Day After Tomorrow, there is a very interesting little reference to Soylent Green in The Day After Tomorrow. Now, remember, Day After Tomorrow is climate change, but somehow it's freezing, right? The whole world is freezing. And there's a scene where people are taking refuge in the New York Public Library, and they are burning books to keep warm, right? Which for a lot of people is the most horrifying thing in the world. And of course, famously, the Nazis burned books, and then they burned people and so on and all that. And there's a particular scene where a librarian is holding on to a copy of, and I think it's supposed to be the Gutenberg Bible. And he says, I'm going to try to save this one little piece of civilization. If you physically look at the book that he's holding, it looks like a thicker version of that Soylent Green report that Saul Roth
the ledger
talked about. Yeah. Which reveals that, hey, the oceans are dying, it's all over, and Soylent Green is people. It's one of those things where I don't necessarily know Roland Emmerich sat there and said, hey, let's make a reference to Soylent Green, but the theme is the same, is that when the climate change is so bad, the apocalypse is so bad, people just don't care anymore about the higher values of like preserving civilization. They just want to live.
Right.
And so they'll burn books or they'll eat people.
Right. Exactly. And you mentioned the banality of evil thing. And so I'm a huge fan of Room 237, which is like the rabbit hole movie for anyone to like become into the rabbit hole of movies. Like that's where I would point someone. And they talk about in that movie the idea of like the typewriter as like instrument of death, right? Because that's what they were using. It was all very mechanical. It's just cling, cling, next person. And all those people are just lines on a list that are being sent to their death. And again, like you said, if that guy was put in charge of fucking making widgets, he would have done a good job. I say the same thing about whenever I watch Gangland on History Channel. It's like, these guys are just enterprising entrepreneurs who happen to sell drugs. Like, I mean, you know what I mean? In a lot of ways, like these people are making a lot of money just they're doing something illegal, but they're clearly good at it. It's just too bad it's pointed in one direction. It would be nice if it was pointed at another. But the banality of evil, I think it's just as important now as it was in 73, because in 2023, when we talk about corporate responsibility and corporate ethics, I think, is a very oxymoronical term in a lot of ways. I think it's always very hard to have that discussion, even now more so than then, because now I think we all feel the corporations are baddies. But like, I have a friend who worked at McKesson, and like, nobody is going to go, hey, McKesson's a good company, because they make all sorts of horrifying things, including fentanyl and missile guidance shit. Like, they're a legit company that's, we do all the spectrum. But I know my friend wasn't going and causing people to overdose on fentanyl. But again, it's that same question of like, can you work for a company that does bad things? Are you a bad person? Because plenty of people work for Nestle, and those people aren't exploiting the rainforest. But we know Nestle is, and we've been told they have been for decades now. And like you said, it's like, even if these things are staring us in the face, a lot of people are just like, whatever, whatever, no big deal. Like, and I feel like if put to the exam of like, would you die or eat people? I feel like the number of people that would eat people to survive would be a lot higher than 50% than anybody would like to admit.
Yeah, and I think that this question of can we define evil, since this is Culture Cast, let's get our cultural references. The show by Michael Schur, who is one of the writers of The Office and Parks and Rec, The Good Place, and I'm not going to give too many spoilers away, but one of the points brought up in The Good Place is it's gotten a lot more complicated to be good or evil today than it was 500 years ago. Because today, you may go buy a shirt, and unknowingly that shirt was made by a 12-year-old girl in Bangladesh. So does that make you evil? But then on the other hand, if that girl didn't have a job making those shirts, her family would go hungry. And so it becomes complicated. Good and evil. I mean, I still, maybe I'm old here, and I'm going to wave my cane at you and say there are definable evil where there's no modifiers, there's no asterisks, whatever. But a lot of other things, like, I think about the fact that, like, it's easy to say a weapons manufacturer is bad, but on the other hand, I'm sort of glad Ukraine has some weapons to defend itself, right? And like, I'm glad in World War II, we built lots of tanks to crush Nazi Germany. So, yay, giant industrial evil corporation. Thanks for helping us out. So it's just complicated in the modern world. And I think in the movie, maybe because of all the, I guess all the stuff that like you were talking about, the trucks picking up people and that famous poster that was the movie poster, right?
Yeah.
These sort of scoop trucks picking up people and dumping them in the back. And people talked about that being a little like over the top. But it wasn't one for my teenage self. That was like one of the most memorable scenes. We all wanted to have one of those trucks. In fact, maybe this tells you the essence of evil that I am, but like, I swear my friends and I mean, we were younger. This is my only excuse. Next, we had some dump trucks, and we took some G.I. Joe figures and some also like little people for train station figures, and we scooped them. And we're arguing about how easy or hard it was to scoop people in the truck. So we didn't resolve the argument at age 11 or about how easy it is to scoop people in a truck.
I mean, it does look dorky now, but I think for the time, for what they're doing, for what this movie is, for the budget of the movie, it's perfectly fine. Realistically, you would want like something that would allow them to be held in a way where they couldn't just jump out of the top because, that's, it was like an open dump truck. Some people could just jump out. Is it made clear that those people that are being picked up, are they being turned into Soylent?
Yeah, you ask a couple of questions. There are some logistical issues. Whenever I'm watching a movie, maybe because I'm a bureaucrat and I'm an administrator, and every day I have to worry about like making sure that the classrooms have the right cameras and like a student is registered on time. I worry about a lot of bureaucratic details. I watch movies through this lens of logistics, and especially when there is some sort of supervillain plot, I think about like, how would that actually work, right? So it's not completely clear. I mean, one of the things that always bothered me, you're thinking, God, this is a pretty creepy thing to be bothered by, Dave. But one of the things that always bothered me is in the end, when Charlton Heston goes to the factory conversion place where they're turning Soylent Green into people. That, and I guess they felt they had to get it was an R rating, as I recall. They didn't want an X rating. The bodies are dumped into this vat, and like they're still in sheets. And I'm going like, I'm thinking if you're going to turn somebody into people, you would like have the sheets removed and like. And I was thinking, like, then you'd have to have a laundry service because you couldn't just leave the sheets. I was thinking of all the bureaucratic details, but one of them lost is how the people get killed from the back of the truck. And is it just people is Saul Roth going to be so? I mean, think about that. We just said he's trying to escape. Well, wait a minute. Escape to being made Soylent Green for somebody else to eat? I wouldn't want that. I would go throw myself in a fire pit or something like that.
They don't know that though. Like that's,
yeah.
I feel like maybe, and again, like maybe it's me and clearly you, and I'm assuming a lot of other people filling in this like gap of like the people that are in the back of that truck. Are they turned into Soylent? It's never answered. But is it, if we say that's never answered, so we can't comment on it, is it really that big of a deal then that they're making Soylent out of people that are willingly euthanizing themselves? Because like, I know that this might sound terrible to some, but if that's what's going on, I'm kind of okay with that.
Yeah, I guess the word isn't okay. Maybe I wouldn't be okay with it.
Yeah, maybe okay is not the best word. The advocation of cannibalism on this show has gotten a little high today.
Yeah, Chris, we know that you would be a great Soylent executive. I feel, I'm going to recommend you for the board.
Soylent White, folks. We have all these different Soylent brands now. We can't find enough ways to turn people into food.
I'm not sure I feel comfortable with Soylent White, actually. So
Soylent maybe. White. Good Lord.
Yeah. So now let's go another pop cultural reference. The Last Ship, another apocalyptic TV series. Actually, I liked it a lot. All 5 seasons I thought was excellent. I don't know if you've covered that in your podcast or not, but I love to talk about The Last Ship. But there is spoilers, but it has been 10 years? No, it hasn't been 10 years. But anyway, there's not quite a parallel, but there is a mass murder situation where you actually see the people being killed and then processed, not for food, but just basically they're trying to kill people off. And I guess in the 70s, they just didn't feel comfortable with that level of gore of like actually killing people. Because I don't think, going back to my bureaucrat self, I don't think you could sustain mass feeding based on just normal death.
Right.
You probably would have to start killing people.
And that's the thing, because like every time I like look at the car or like that, like the scooper, I always try to see if it's like Soylent on it, but I'm assuming it doesn't, and it doesn't. But what my assumption is because the mayor of New York is in bed with the Soylent company, that would therefore be in my mind, like, okay, there's the in that they have of these people that are getting picked up are just being turned into food, which, I mean, look, I think that is obviously a horrifying idea for anybody. I mean, that is truly nightmare fuel. If it's you are protesting not having food, and in the process of protesting the lack of food, you are picked up and turned into food for those people to protest about, yeah, that's pretty fucked up. The ramifications of that are very intense, but like the movie doesn't get there. It kind of doesn't get there, which is okay. It kind of leaves it up to us to maybe fill in that gap a little bit, which is okay. It's kind of surprising because this movie does have people getting shot, a guy getting smashed by the bucket of the dump truck. So like it's not afraid to go there. It just feels like it gets right up to the edge and it doesn't look all the way over, as it were. It kind of peeks over. It's like Soylent is people, and it's so concerned with the Soylent is people twist that it almost lets it get in the way of telling an interesting story in a way, because it had to be the last thing of the movie. And that kind of always bugs me, because it then feels like the twist is like such a thing. And like I wish that this movie maybe gave you an idea Soylent is people is pretty obvious. Like, I don't know why it's such a big twist at the end. You see that for like 10 minutes is what it feels like. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And unfortunately, the detective part of this, the solution is not really a very good in terms of detective genre, because that book that we're talking about, which basically says, oh, by the way, the oceans are dying and Soylent Green is people. I'm not 100% sure it actually says that or implies that. I mean, I have read it, but certainly when Saul reads it, that's the implication. Well, Charlton Heston finds that book pretty early on. And so the rest of the movie, you think like, well, he could have just read that book 30 minutes into the movie and like at the end, right?
Right.
But they couldn't end the movie. So it's one of those detective things where the detective really, if you think about it, probably solved the case like in the first 15 minutes, but they have to have a 2-hour movie. So they just keep, and then he goes back to, oh, let's take a look at that old evidence that I've been ignoring for 2 hours. Oh, they're this guy's the kid. Chris is the killer. I knew it.
Right.
That's pretty clunky.
Yeah, and in terms of like it being a detective story, it's a better post-apocalyptic sci-fi movie than it is a detective story. And, Charlton Heston is great in the movie. I don't think he really does much other than he's playing Charlton Heston. I mean, at one point he beds down a woman for no reason other than because he can, seemingly. Like, the scenes of him in that apartment are my favorite parts of this movie, because he, for whatever reason, as an actor, made the decision to go and stand in front of the air conditioning unit a bunch of times to be like, I need to cool off. And I love those little touches in his performance of him just like being enamored with the ice or the AC or the whiskey. He like shows up at the crime scene. He's like, give me that fucking bottle of whiskey. Like, wait a second here. Oh, right. Nobody has any of this. Nobody has seen any of this. This is privileged goods. So, of course, this guy's going to come in and be like, give me a little taste of that. Give me a little bit of this. He's kind of like a dirty cop, right? Like, is that kind of the take here? Because he's not on the up and up, is what it seems like.
Well, going back in time again, there's some good passages in the novel, The Godfather, about that at the time in the 50s and 60s. And as you may know, Chris, I actually wrote a book about police and the media. And at the time, there was a distinction between dishonest graft as a police officer and honest graft. Okay. I mean,
right.
That wouldn't get you past a review board today. But at the time, so what was honest graft? Honest graft was like you're a police officer walking the beat in New York, in Brooklyn in 1952. And when you go for lunch, the guy at the diner who owns the diner comps you the lunch, and maybe thanks you for running off those bums that were in your front step on this 1952 word, and gives you $10 on the side. And that was considered to be honest graft. Like you were still doing your job. So in the movie, there's still some of that, where he goes to where the murder is and he takes a silk pillowcase and he stuffs marmalade and whatever else he can find in the refrigerator and a book. And remember, he doesn't think the book is a clue. He just knows his friend Saul loves books and paper. And like, remember Saul, the first thing what he does when he sees the book is like he feels the pages. Oh, this, back in the old days, they made real paper like this, not the crap paper we use today. So he helps himself to everything, including the mistress of the executive who was killed. And I think that's meant to show sort of ordinary corruption. Remember, he won't take a bribe to throw a case. If when they try to tell him, get off this case and don't solve it,
right?
He's an honest cop there where it matters.
Trying to cover up the truth, man. It's that exact thing. And he's like, I'm I'm not dropping that case. You're a hell of a cop. Like it's that thing. I mean, look, we've seen it a million times, right? And I can't tell though if that does that play into the end. Is his boss on the take? Because it's
in the book again. There is no Soylent Green is people in the book, but you do see like there's some characters missing in the movie, and like you don't get a real, except just a cursory view of the power structure. I mean, it's not like you see the executives in Davos having a big conversation about, Soylent Green. Well, we really got to start, turning people into food or something like that.
Right.
So in the book, it's more explicit that, the mayor calls the chief of police and the chief of police calls the head of the sector, and it works its way down the chain of command to he's told, hey, lay off this case. We got something else for you to do. Although it's not explained, really, the movie is better than the book. I really do have to say that. Maybe some Harry Harrison fans disagree. I'm a Harry Harrison fan. We should talk about him in a moment. But in the book, it's more explicit about the chain of command of corruption. So maybe his inspector, I mean, the guy who's, every cop show in the 70s and 80s had the poor guy who was sitting behind the desk at the precinct house who was yelling at Clint Eastwood, like, stop it, you just killed 50 people in a car chase. Don't do it again or you'll be in trouble, type of movie scene. Lethal Weapon, very famous movie, 80s movie, Mel Gibson famously just the rogue cop versus the bureaucrat cop in the station. That was part of a stereotype back then.
Well, and that is the other thing. It's funny because I watch a lot of 70s cop stuff. So I've done an entire show on Kolchak, which is cop adjacent. And I'm 2/3 of the way through Barney Miller, which started in the 70s and ended in the 80s. And what's funny is like Barney Miller still has that feel. And this has that feel of 70s because this is ultimately supposed to be 2022. But it is the 70s in New York. And it has that like hot New York, Son of Sam summer of New York. Like that's the thing about this movie. It feels like the New York of the garbage men strike. It's that New York. Like it is. Like even though it's supposed to be 2022, it is still the 70s New York. So I love that about this movie because it slots itself in with so many other movies that are shot in the 70s that take place in New York, because New York of the 70s always ends up being a character in these movies. It's such a unique time in New York. It's kind of like, for me, the 90s of New York is just, that's what I think of because that's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The openings of those movies always showed people enjoying pizza on the street of 90s New York City. And that's what I think of New York. And I know that tons of people think of this New York when they think of New York, which is the 70s kind of gritty, king of comedy, New York.
Now, that's a really good point. So Saul Roth is obviously supposed to be someone in his 80s, right? So 2022, he's looking back 50 years to when the movie is made around. And that was a horrible New York.
Right.
The good old days were one of the worst times in New York. There was high crime. It was hot. I mean, there was a garbage strike. I mean, if the 70s New York was nobody's idea of the good old days. But that, I guess that's an ironic, sardonic comment that here's this old guy, and it's so sad that his good old days were terrible, but compared to the world he's living in the future, even the New York of the 70s looks good.
Well, and that for me is a segue into another interesting topic, which is the idea of like looking back on the past and remembering it fondly, because that's the entire Thanatorium thing. So in the movie, we've kind of mentioned Edward G. Robinson. He goes and he euthanizes himself, which is a legal thing you can do in the world now, I believe, in some Nordic country, probably Finland, Greenland,
there
or
are suicide
Norway.
booths in some countries. Yeah. Switzerland, Netherlands, I believe. Yeah.
So you could do that now, but in the movie, he goes and euthanizes himself, and it's kind of this pomp and circumstance, and he goes into what could be described as the 360 theater in Disney World or Disneyland, where you would see such great films as I forget what these time traveling Robin Williams things, but it's like a panorama thing, and he's sitting there on a table naked with a sheet over him watching images of nature, which does not exist now, best we can tell. And again,
you notice he's not watching New York in the 70s. He's not watching Dog Day Afternoon. I mean, that would have been like the ultimate irony, is like and I can understand why the filmmakers didn't do it, but like you could imagine he's watching Al Pacino in Dog Day Afternoon, a classic hot New York's crime, everybody's miserable movie, right?
Right. Or like
as the good old days.
Right. And it's like instead it's pastoral images of nature and deer and running water. And again, it harkens up this image now, and we hear it all the time of like, ladies and gentlemen, they're coming to steal your jobs. And remember the good old days, ladies and gentlemen, before they came to take things away. And it's like, it's that idea of like the idea that somehow the past was better than now. And in this movie's case, literally it had to have been, at least in terms of nature. But like you mentioned, culturally, if we're talking about when this movie takes place and when he's referencing the good old days, they were no better than the now times. They're shockingly similar. There's just no food shortage.
There's a concept in anthropology, and in my book on police, I talk about this because when you talk to older people, I'm stereotyping myself here, in any profession, they will tell you it was better in the old days, right? I'm sure if you talk to some old radio people, they'll tell you, yeah, you got these podcasts, kid. But in my day, back at WUSA in 1975, we really knew how to do audio and things like that. Well, it is interesting how the past that he remembers is unconnected. I mean, he was a professor. He was not a professor at Vanderbilt. He was not a professor at Virginia State or something like that. He was the professor in New York. So where were these scenes of these flowers? And it looks like the Trapp family is going to run across these fields,
right?
Singing. So it's a fantasy past rather than a real past. So in anthropology, there's a concept called tales of decline. And basically everywhere you find, it's everywhere, all over the planet, whenever you find an older generation or within a profession or just an old generation of age, they will usually tell you, with some exceptions, like, people who lived through World War II, except, have you ever talked? I mean, I over the years, for the work I've done, I've interviewed veterans, right? And a lot of veterans will tell you a variation of the following, that, I was a bomber pilot or I fought in Battle of the Bulge, and that was a hellish time. It was absolutely a hellish time, but it was the greatest time of my life because I was with my brothers and we trusted each other and, we did the job our country wanted to do. So there's a sort of mixture of a horrible experience, but also the people that you shared it with making it a happy experience. Saul Roth's vision is odd because it's not his past. It's not anything he probably spent a lot of time doing as an NYU professor or whatever he was in 1975.
Yeah, it does feel very disconnected from the rest of the movie. And watching it, because I watched it twice for this conversation, I wondered kind of, again, what is the movie saying here? Like, what are you telling us here, movie, by having something like this? And, it made me think of 2001 a little bit, that kind of the interlude scene in 2001. It doesn't have the same psychedelia that movie kind of traffics in, which I think works for me. It works in that movie, but I know for a lot of people it doesn't work. And I think for a lot of people, this kind of scene may seem like completely removed from what else is going on. And I was just wondering, because I feel like for me, it's this idea that he wants to try and reconnect with the natural world, which throughout the movie, right? What is the thing that they're always struggling and striving for is like real food, right? Which only comes from the natural world. And that loss of the natural world is the reason they're in the world they're in now. I mean, the food that they're eating is like the equivalent of if you went now and only ate from the frozen food aisle at, Walmart, and it was the dollar, like Banquet and stuff. It's hyper processed food. And look, if you have to eat that because that's the only option that you have, that's one thing. But in this movie, that is the only option that they have. So it's hyper processed food and it's not nutritious. I mean, that's the thing, they mentioned at the beginning, like Soylent Green is now more nutritious. And it's like, okay, what the fuck were they eating before? Like, it's that thing of like, when McDonald's introduced their chicken nuggets now made with white meat chicken. It's like, guys, yeah, we know, but like you're making people question what they were made with before, which we all know it's just like the scraps and shit, but that's fine. But it's the same idea of like, okay, so we're trying to make things better and reconnect with the natural world by making it more nutritious and green and healthy, but it's still made from people. It's still over processed and hyper produced food that we have to go through these undoubtedly extended processes to make it viable to even eat, right? Like anything else, the humans don't just magically become food. They don't go into a box and pop out as hot dogs on the other side. So they have to be processed. And it's like, I think that the whole thanatorium thing is more just this idea of at the point in his life where he can't reconnect with the natural world any other way other than the sweet release of death. Because like even the food that they eat is not real anymore. It's hyper produced and over processed. But I mean, again, in 1973, over processed food wasn't really a thing. Like that's, that we're only now at that point getting to the point where, food is becoming hyper.
I mean, this was, remember, 1960s and 70s was also the back to nature movement, hippies. It was, people were asking the silent spring about the environmental disaster of pesticides. So people were asking about where our food is coming from and things. And this, it's interesting. We're asking the same questions. You bring up this other point about capitalism and socialism both need marketing. Right. I mean, the Soviet Union was always marketing to its own people in the same way we market, except they had fewer advertising agencies. But at this point, they are still, you still see advertisements on TV selling Soylent, right? And you're thinking like, God, there's only like 2 forms of food in the whole world. Do you actually need to market it? Like, this is food. Eat it or you'll die. I mean, I guess that would be the advertising slogan. And notice there's no celebrities eating Soylent Green. Like, oh, sorry, I, the movie star, eating Soylent Green. It's a world where they've run out of options in every possible way. And I think we talk about dystopian futures, right, and apocalyptic futures. And in some of them, the hero comes along, and the Omega Man, which is from a famous Charles Beaumont, as I recall, short story that was made with Vincent Price as the last man on Earth, and then Charlton Heston as the Omega Man, and then most recently Will Smith did a version of it.
Oh boy, didn't he?
Yeah.
That's
no
actually
comment.
is that or those are all based off the Matheson short story.
Yes, it's Matheson.
I Am
right.
Legend.
I'm mixing up my
the
Twilight
joke
Zone.
The joke that I always tell is yet the name in the story, the title of the story has yet to be done correctly in any of the stories. None of the stories address what the fucking title has to do with anything. Like, it blows my mind.
None of the movies have followed the story. You're absolutely right. And it was Richard Matheson. Thank you. You've corrected the old guy here.
Well, I was going to say, though, Charles Beaumont, I only know Charles Beaumont because his stuff shows up a lot in Twilight Zone 1985.
Yeah, they were both of them had stuff that was used for Twilight Zone. That one of my confusions there. But in the I Am Legend movie mythos, not the story, but the movie mythos, it was more the traditional Hollywood of like the world is falling apart, but the action hero, especially in Omega Man, I mean, the action hero dies as a martyr to save humanity. And of course, Will Smith sort of, I got so confused there at the end. I don't know what Will Smith
They're
did,
making a sequel, and I believe the canonical ending that they're using is the one that he gets away. The ending on the DVD, I think, is the one that they're using, which is like, boy, if we're talking about the ability to really go for it, like you're forsaking everybody who saw your movie in theaters. That's
if you watched the action hero movies of the 60s and 70s, the big ones for me were a Steve McQueen movie or a Clint Eastwood movie. In a lot of cases, and Charlton Heston in the Omega Man, the hero dies with a Christ-like or martyr-like sacrifice for humanity. But the point is that he saves humanity, right?
Right.
So in the Omega Man, Charlton Heston's blood, literally, I'm talking, you could just insert a whole bunch of religious commentary here, but literally his blood saves the world. That's implied, right? Because he's got this immunity that he got with medical experiments. Well, there's no saving the world in Soylent Green. The hero can't do anything. In fact, Charlton Heston is sort of irrelevant. I mean, I guess maybe it's not, I personally think it's clear that it's not going to be revealed. It's going to be silenced.
Well,
it's not like on the evening news, they'll say, well, we just broke this story. We're going to tell you Soylent Green is people. But the point is that nothing he does is going to save the world. Can't.
Right.
It's all over.
Right. Well, and I think it's interesting, too, the way I read the ending, because, obviously the movie ends. He knows the truth. He's going to go spread the truth. Chuck Connors shows up, not as a werewolf, just as menacing Chuck Connors, and beats the shit out of Charlton Heston, and they go tit for tat. Charlton Heston kills Chuck Connors, but he's mortally wounded, and he's being dragged off on the stretcher, and he's screaming for the heavens, try out. I would say Charlton Heston is people. He is people, folks. Don't forget, Charlton Heston is Jesus Christ. Soylent Green is people, is what he keeps screaming over and over again. And the way I read it is, if those people that were the ones who needed the most cared, they would react. And guess what? Those people are just chilling. They don't care. Like, what does it even matter if Soylent Green is people? Like, what the fuck?
Nobody's chilling. Nobody's chilling.
But they're like just sitting there. Like, all the people are just like sitting there watching him. Yeah. But they're like, the way that they react is not, shock and horror. They're just like, I think it may be one of those things where society kind of just tacitly, maybe unexplicitly just accepted that what was going on and just don't care. And, he's the one screaming the truth and everybody else is just in the other side of the room going, we know, we can't do anything about it though. Like, I wonder, because again, like you could read it that way. I feel like my read and your read is just, at the end of the day, doesn't really matter. Like, there's nothing anybody can do about it at this point. It's so entrenched in the culture that to undo Soylent Green would mean society would be completely screwed.
Well, part of it is technology, communications technology in particular. So I'm sure you've seen these skits on television and social media about like movies that would be ruined by cell phones or movies that would be ruined by social media, right? Like Home Alone. Mom, you left me here. Okay, I'm alone at the house. Okay, done.
Lots of episodes
over, right?
of Seinfeld would be ruined by having a cell phone.
Yeah. So this is 2022 in the movie, but it's not our 2022. So there's no social media. I was actually thinking about this the other day about like, okay, they remake Soylent Green. I think they would try to fix that ending and have like hundreds of people there all pulling out their phones and uploading to Instagram and TikTok, him screaming Soylent Green is people. And the authorities are going nuts because they can't silence him. So maybe that would be my version, starring Will Smith, I guess.
I think what also would be interesting is if, and Barney Miller talks about this, paranoids with proof is what they always say. They have the people come into the precinct that are the paranoids, but they have the proof. They know that something's happening. The way I would do Soylent Green now, because I was thinking about the same thing. I was like, how would you do this now? You would do this as a TV show, not as because movies and TV at this point, like TV, I think is a more interesting medium for long form narrative. But the reason you do that is I think you would have it be like an ensemble cast with several characters. But I think the main character or one of the main characters would have to be an Alex Jones type who like, ladies and gentlemen, Soylent Green is people. I read the manuscript, and I can't tell you any other way. Soylent Green is people, ladies and gentlemen. It's shocking truth. Like, because at the end of the day, if someone were to say something like that to you, the level of what Soylent Green is people means to the 2022 of this movie, if people were saying that to you now, it would be received to you the way things Alex Jones says is received by so many of us, which is complete lunacy. If someone said to you tomorrow, McDonald's is people, you would go, you're fucking nuts. Right. Like, but that's what we're talking about here. It's like that level of like something is something. It should shatter your preconceived notion of what reality is. Because if someone in this world heard Soylent Green is people, they should theoretically take the Soylent out of their mouth and throw it away and be like, I'm never eating this again. But again, like that's not what happens because society is beyond its breaking point, because that's what happens when you have to eat people. You're beyond your breaking point as a society if cannibalism has become accepted, not even accepted, just expected almost.
Well, this brings up a question for you as a professor of culture far beyond my scope. What is left for shocking revelation? Because I was having some conversation with a room full of students, and some of them had seen Sixth Sense. Some Cabin in the Woods was more common as a shocking revelation there. Are we allowed to talk about Cabin in the Woods? It's been 10 years. No, maybe not.
Yeah. If not close.
Yeah.
You know what? We can talk about it because I don't like that movie.
Okay.
All y'all who like that movie, sorry, but I'm not a fan. Maybe I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it recently. It has been 10 years. It's been 11 years since Cabin in the Woods.
Okay. So it's past its decade expiration for spoiler, but I like the last 5 minutes of the movie. Let's put it that way, because I like them bringing up the concept of like, wait a minute, we have an entire genre here where apparently audiences will pay money to torture teenagers and enjoy it, right? So I like that as an idea. Well, but it does bring up the question of, I'm trying to think of movies where there has been a shocking revelation that has actually been shocking. And maybe part of growing old is you become a little bit cynical, you become a little bit like overstimulated. And I cannot remember, with maybe the exception of Cabin in the Woods, a TV show or a movie series where I have been like, oh my gosh, I'm shocked by that revelation. I mean, sometimes you find, honestly, on most TV detective series, all you have to do is figure out who the most innocent person is, and they turn out to be the murderer, right? I mean, that's not a shocking revelation. But what would you say counts today in the last 10 years, or maybe so that you can talk about it, spoiler, as a shocking revelation anywhere near Soylent Green's people?
So it was something I just recently watched, and I hadn't seen it when it came out, but it was well regarded when it came out. It's the Mike Flanagan Haunting of Hill House series. And there's did you see it?
I watched the old, is it based on the same thing, the British
Jackson.
Old movie? Well, it's based Shirley Jackson's short story. Yeah.
Right. It's a lot different than that, but there's a very big twist about on the literal halfway point of the show that I think works pretty well and is pretty surprising. And I think as an audience member, I went, that's pretty good. I think honestly, in this day and age, the place where twists really live and are done well is on TV, because they give you some time to lull you into a sense of security, and then they punch you right in the face with a twist. That's TV. I mean, movies can do it too. A movie that I think of that has a great twist, and it's not really a twist, but it is a twist, is the last 15 minutes of The Departed are fucking wild. I mean, it's just like ping-ponging from horrible thing to things that are just like, whoa, and this happened and that happened. Just, okay, The Departed is a good one. I mean, everybody always talks about The Crying Game, but I feel like, no, who wants to talk about The Crying Game in 2023? Definitely not me. I don't know, like twists, I think after in a post Sixth Sense world where that became so ubiquitous, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of things that are like surprising anymore that have gotten into the public zeitgeist as much. And like, What's in the Box? That's a pretty good one. We already mentioned that one. Like, I don't know. Luke, No, Luke, I'm Your Father. That's a pretty good one. That's 70s as well.
It is interesting because after historically, I remember after Sixth Sense, poor M. Night Shyamalan has been stuck and he's commented on this himself. I mean, if he were here, he would say it himself, that like he's been stuck that everybody expects a twist in every movie, every TV show that he does. But
to be fair, like, though, he keeps kind of leaning into it, though. M. Night Shyamalan.
It's his thing, right? But is there anything left to, I as a younger person, I'm asking you to represent your generation of younger viewers.
I see what the question really is.
Are we, as I crabby old guy, that's my role here, saying, we don't have twists like we used to in my day. In my day, you can have a real movie ending twist. Nowadays, they just got, just silly, oh yeah, I saw that coming a mile away twist.
I'm going to ask you, have you seen a Serbian film?
No, and I never will.
You know what it is, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I've watched about 4 or 5 YouTube videos that I fast forwarded through because I just wanted to know about the culture. There's 2 films, a Serbian film and then a Russian World War II war film, Come and See. I don't like blood and guts horror, and I certainly don't like children being hurt and things like that. I just don't want to see it.
Sure.
And there's 3 or 4 films where I I will happily go to my grave in the booth, never having watched those films. Of course, that would be the twist ending of my life, is that I'm in the booth 20 years from now and they show a Serbian film instead of nature. They got confused. They thought I wanted flowers and bunnies, and they put a Serbian film. That's your ending there.
And then I'll be talking to you on the thing, David, isn't it beautiful? No, help me. Jesus Christ. I've seen a Serbian film. We did an episode on it. It's rough, but so was the conflict in that part of the world for the longest time. So and again, we as Westerners don't understand that. Just like, my family on my dad's side is Ukrainian, and we know that there's a conflict in Ukraine going on, and my last name is Ukrainian. And, I can't really fathom what's going on outside of the things that I've seen and heard because of the media. So again, it's hard to fathom that level of brutality in reality because I stray so far away from it in the things that I watch. Because look, I'm not sitting and watching a Serbian film every day. I've seen it a couple times. There are movies that I like that are brutal and rough and are over the top, like the Poughkeepsie tapes. I love that movie. It's over the top. It's rough. It's a hard one to get through, but I enjoy it, and for a lot of reasons that have less to do with the movie specifically and more with the way it's done and the way it makes me feel. But Soylent Green and where it's coming from and the idea of pushing that twist to the end and asking the audience, did you see that coming? I like that about the movie. It just feels like they let us know way too early what was going to happen. And then they expected us to be surprised. And I think, to ultimately answer your question about, is there anything shocking anymore? If, incest is not the final straw, because that's what a Serbian film is talking about. Ultimately, that's where that movie ends up going. If that's not the limit, which I think it is in terms of a big twist or the reveal being kind of over the top, I think that's got to be it, is sexual assault, abuse type thing. Those kinds of twists, I think, are the furthest reaches of this that we can go to, because beyond that, it's then we're just talking reality and real life stuff. But I think anything psychosexual or sadomasochistic, the whole what's in the box twist is a serial killer thing. That lives in the true crime world. And so many of the twists that we're talking about are true crime twists, or they're predicated by violence. And that's the thing. Many of these twists, it's less about the twist itself, but the way it's presented. The twist in the Serbian film is awful, but then watching it is just as bad. Sometimes the twist is just explained off screen and you never see it, but sometimes you see it, and it's it can work both ways. Because again, in this movie, we don't really see people being turned into Soylent Green. That process would be horrifying. We don't see it. Like you mentioned, you just see people in bags going up a conveyor belt. There's more gore in other parts of this movie, and that's shocking because the primary purpose of this movie is to talk about people being eaten by other people.
Yeah. So, and I'm not trying to sell anything because this is out of print, but about 25 years ago, I wrote a book called Visions of War. And I looked at the history of the visualization of war imagery, and I did it by particular genre. So, for example, I had a chapter on the horrors of war, and I went back thousands of years looking at how something today that you and I would probably agree are, quote, the horrors of war, end quote. For example, children being killed, right? Civilians being killed. There is a modern consensus. It's not agreed to because people are still killing civilians, but it's agreed that they'll at least say it's saying bad. So there are militaries today who are killing civilians, but their marketing department will announce they're not killing civilians. But if you go back a couple thousand years to, say, the Assyrians civilization in the Near East, they went to war a lot. And if you can still see in museums or on site, they did these really beautifully well done bas reliefs or reliefs where they showed in great forensic detail how they made war. And they will show, hey, we took the city of Escadon and we slaughtered all the inhabitants, every single one, all the children, all the goats, we killed them all. And here's a picture of it, And then the Assyrian king in his stela describing, he'd say, yeah, I attacked this city and I killed all the civilians. I'm really bad. I'm the great king and everybody worshiped me. And I did this by the orders of God. So you go back a couple of thousand years, and for a long time in human history, what you and I would call because we're modern people, right? We call the horrors of war were pretty ordinary stuff and were not considered to be unethical or immoral.
Right.
It's only relatively recent in human history that that's become at least a consensus of pretending that we all agree not to do that. Although obviously it's being done today, so people are still doing it, but they're not putting it on television and saying, hey, we're proud of this. That's the key point. So I thought it was interesting that in the 70s, the filmmakers made this decision that we're going to have technically the most gruesome topic imaginable to human beings, cannibalism, but we're going to downplay it visually.
Well, and compare it to like, a film that, again, I wouldn't necessarily consider it a contemporary, but when I think of cannibalism, I think of one movie, and that's Ruggero Deodato's Cannibal Holocaust, which comes out 7 years after this, which is about as cannibal-y as it gets in terms of like, you want cannibalism, folks? You're getting cannibalism. Like that's the other thing I think of when I think of cannibalism in media is Cannibal Holocaust. And that is about as far from this as, like, you could do these as a 1A and 1B because they're talking about cannibalism, but one is like the bureaucracy of cannibalism and the other is kind of the sickening reality of, like, Long Pig. Because again, like in Soylent Green, if we take it at face value that they're taking these people and they're, again, I think ultimately Soylent Green is the story of commoditization of people from, Saul Roth having no usefulness in the system anymore as an additive nobody puts in their gasoline type thing. So he's just off on the sidelines being waiting to be thrown away like asbestos or lead or things we don't use in construction anymore the way we used to. So he's no longer a commodity. Charlton Heston is quickly not becoming a commodity because he's an honest cop in a world where people are going to have to be bought by corporations to be sidelined because, again, Soylent has to be able to kill people with nobody in their way. And Charlton Heston's clearly an honest cop, so he's no longer a commodity. But the real commodity are what happens when you die. Because if Charlton Heston dies at the end of the movie, which I assume he does, he's going to get turned into Soylent Green. End of story. Just like Saul Roth, just like everybody else. And the commoditization of people is, he screams it. He's like, they're going to breed us just like they breed cattle. And it's like, yeah, they are. But here's the thing. They've got overpopulation as it is. So they don't need to breed you guys right now. They need to decrease the herd. It's like hunting the diseased deer. It's like, it's time to make a lot of food and store it somewhere because we have way too many people as it is.
Well, nobody is as gruesome as preteen boys. And I remember in our McDonald's critique of the film, we were thinking about, I guess the concept of director's cut and like extended cut did not exist at that time because we didn't even have DVDs, right? So, but we did think of some alternative endings. And one of them, the last ending would have been, you have a close-up of this machine spitting out new chips of Soylent Green, and then like it goes to the marketplace, and it's sort of implied that's Charlton Heston.
Yeah, see that if that were me, that's what I would do. And to like you end the movie with like the the pastoral music and the great imagery, and then it slowly morphs into the Soylent Green production line, and it shows them spitting it out, and all you can think is exactly that. It's like, is that where Saul Roth and Charlton Heston ended up? And it's like, yes, exactly, because the system goes on. I mean, again, like you mentioned with the Nazis, I mean, look, each one of those people on that line was a person with a family and a history and a life. And it's just a line item being scratched through. And it's that commoditization of people that is ultimately, I think, what Soylent Green is talking about. It's we as people now in 2023 have never been more commoditized than we are now. Our information is being sold constantly. If you have Facebook and social media, your information is being sold and used for people to try to get your attention so that you can do what? Give them more money because you are a commodity to them. And we each have, realistically, though I know it doesn't exist in this country, but in other countries, there's something similar. We each have like a viability score to these companies as to how much money we can afford to spend with them or how much money they think they might get from us. And that's, I mean, Soylent Green is ultimately talking about what happens when people become commodities and we lose this humanity that we inherently all have. Because again, some people had to be okay with the decision to literally kill people so that other people could eat them. Mind you, those people aren't eating people though. That's the funny part about the entire movie is the rich people don't want to eat Soylent Green. They just want to make money off.
Yeah, that they are eating something else, although it's sort of implied that maybe that's not going to last either. Going to what you just said, World War II was really the ultimate expression of the industrialization of mass murder, not just the mass murder of like civilians and individuals in like death camps. And then the Soviets were doing their gulag, where they were killing hundreds of thousands, millions of people as well. So Mao killed, there were a lot. The 20th century was the darkest century in the history of humanity in terms of the body count, and also the introduction of industrialization and mechanization and even computerization, keeping track of the bureaucracy of who to kill when. And so the 60s and the 70s were really in some way a reaction to that. And that's why you had hippies who wanted to go back to nature and live on a commune and grow their own food. And Soylent Green is really in the middle of that nexus. So I think it was a very good film for its time. I think it's improved, not necessarily in the quality of a film, but in the questions it raises that are still applicable. Tolkien famously said he didn't believe in allegory, like he didn't want people to read his books and say, "Oh, you're really talking about World War I." But he did think that literature should be applicable. So somebody should be able to say, what does Tolkien have to tell us about our time and of relevance? So I think a good movie at the end of the day, or a good TV show, a book, magazine, graphic novel, still has something to say to us. A discussion can still be had with the text, even though 50, 60 years have passed.
I totally agree with you. And again, I think that Soylent Green is, unfortunately, I think is the right term, right within that conversation. I don't think any one of us, outside of the people that make these things happen, I don't think any one of us want the environment to be destroyed to the point of Soylent Green. But again, if there's money to be made, there will be resources to exploit. And that's, again, kind of the story of Soylent Green, is when we exploit the natural world to the point of exhaustion, what else do we have to exploit but one another and ourselves? And that's what happens, because people are literally being scooped up and turned into food for other people who are then going to be turned into food. It's a never-ending cycle. And, to the point of, and I think it's maybe the only moment of the movie where it's a little on the nose and it's a little ham-fisted, and Stanley Greenberg maybe misses the point a little bit, is the moment where Leah Taylor-Young is referring to, the concubines as furniture. It's like, oh God, we get it. Like, it doesn't have to be that obvious, where there's that felt the most unnecessary thing in the movie is Leah Taylor-Young, and all of that. Cause it feels like the movie is a lot smarter than that. And it doesn't need to be that overt with the people are furniture thing. You don't actually have to say it, movie. We get it. You're doing a good enough job without it. You almost had it. And then you had to just go and say, but women are furniture too. It's okay, got it. That felt a little excessive.
Yeah, I think it was in line with the theme of dehumanization of people not being just a function. The ultimate dehumanization is that you're just protein, right?
Right.
So she is, and it's, by the way, it's interesting. She talks about the murdered executive very kindly. He was always nice to her and he treated her well. He was exploiting her. But I think this goes to this idea of hopelessness. There's not a villain in this movie in the traditional sense. Chuck Connors, he's just a guy doing a job, and he's earning a living for his family. In the movie they don't show his family, but you can understand why somebody would be a trained killer in a world where life is worthless, right?
Right.
So it's hard to. There's no Snidely Whiplash villain twirling his mustache and swinging on a chair with a white cat in this movie. No. The evil is ourselves. I think we go to, before you were born, there was a famous cartoon strip called Pogo, and there's a line there which became sort of a discussion about America's involvement in Vietnam. We have met the enemy and they are us. It was a play on the idea of militarily of we've met the enemy and we have them. But we have met the enemy and they are us. And I think at the end of the day, that's what I would describe to my children and grandchildren Soylent Green is about, is the villain is us. we did this. It wasn't just 5 guys at some corporation. Like we all collaborated in the destruction of the world.
It said Pogo, right?
Pogo. Look up Pogo.
Walter Kelly, right?
Yeah, Walt Kelly, yeah.
What's really funny is I was at an antique mall over the weekend, and I bought a Pogo book for no reason other than it spoke to me for whatever reason. And
twist
as I was
ending, Chris, ending, great.
I sitting here listening to you say that, all I could think to myself was, how is this even possible? Because I've never heard that mentioned, never seen anything until 2 days ago. I'm not even joking. It's sitting on the other side of the desk from me. It's like a compendium of 3 of Pogo's greatest hits. So that's a little weird.
Well, that will be one of them. I don't know if you flipped through it yet, but it was one of his very famous ones. Yeah.
I mean, look, humanity can't get out of its own way. I think we've seen that. I mean, Soylent Green is just another example of our inability to do the right thing, even when given every ample opportunity to do so. And that's fine. I mean, that's humanity's ultimate failing, is that humanity is human and not AI. So, is humanity doomed for Soylent Green? No. I mean, of the cannibalistic fiction that exists out there that advocates for the eating of people, I'd much more be interested in a Modest Proposal future than a Soylent Green future, Because, I mean, again, like a Modest Proposal is talking about the same thing, but a Modest Proposal is talking about how we can prevent getting to that point, as opposed to Soylent Green, where it's like, we have to eat people now. we have to eat. There's that moment in Soylent Green that we don't see where there's all these people that look at one another and just go, guess we have to eat people now, huh? Like, and everybody just kind of shrugs their shoulders and goes, shit. Like that's, I mean, and again, it's that decision that's made in a boardroom somewhere that none of us get to be privy to. That ultimate, as again, what is the banality of evil if not that? Like a decision made in a vacuum that ultimately dictates the course of humanity, at least in Soylent Green's, case. So final thoughts on Soylent Green.
Yeah, Soylent Green is a very good film that everybody should watch to get a slice of 1970s apocalyptic Charlton Heston, all these great parts of the building of popular culture. It still speaks to us. There are still questions that it raises. There are still answers that disturb us. It's one of the great movie twists of all time. So I think it should be on everyone's list to watch at least once.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better myself. It's a movie that it has gotten better with age, and that's an unfortunate fact. And it's a movie that hopefully does not continue to get better with age. Maybe there will be a time and place where people watch Soylent Green and go, thankfully we avoided having to do that, folks, and we don't have to eat one another. And maybe that will be the case. Or maybe 10, 20, 30, hopefully after I'm dead and we're all long gone, they look back on this and go, well, that Soylent company that started because of Soylent Green is now actually turning people into food. And then it would be truly coming full circle. But like we've kind of mentioned, it's a fun movie, but it opens a lot of doors that have less than exciting destinations on the other side, especially now that we kind of live on the other side of them. So yeah, fun. What a fun, optimistic conversation that we all just had together. So David, if the audience is interested in learning more about the Texas Tech School of Media and Communications that you're the dean of and a professor, where would they go? What would be the best way to connect with you guys over there in West Texas?
Well, just look up College of Media and Communication, Texas Tech. Ask ChatGPT or Google or your local search engine. Certainly, I know you'll probably put some links in the show notes there to our folks, and we've got a lot of exciting faculty here. As I said, we have gaming and AI and analytics, and just it's a very modern world. I mean, I say the world is very modern. That doesn't sound right, but like we're at a time. I'm so blessed to be at a time where there's so much radical change that's fascinating in the world of communications. I mean, you just think in the last 3 or 4 years, media and communications has had several revolutions, and our students, I'm so lucky because I get to meet these young people every day who educate me on like what they're doing, which was different than 2 months ago. They'll tell me like, oh yeah, that was so February, like nobody's doing that anymore. And so I appreciate how much we learn from each other. I think that's a really good point to make nowadays, is that especially in the world of media and communication, it's not us old people teaching young people. We're learning from each other. And so it's a super exciting time to be alive and not in an apocalypse yet.
Right. We're just spinning our wheels until it happens, folks, finding things to keep ourselves busy with, which is okay. Because to be fair, I think that's what everybody's been doing up until this point, is just finding ways to busy themselves until this is all over. So, hey, if you want to find more things to busy yourself with, weirdingwaymedia.com is where you can find this show and so many other shows, including the hyper academic movie podcast that is The Projection Booth, and TV show podcast about 80s TV shows that feature ladies called 80s TV Ladies. Boy, isn't that a name that's right on point? You can find all those things over at weirdingwaymedia.com. As for this show, culturecast.com, Patreon, all those things that you've heard me mention before. I'll mention them again for like the 578th time or whatever we're at now, folks. And yeah, big thanks as always to everybody who gives us a like, rate, and review on iTunes, because that's the easiest way to help us find our audience. David, thank you so much for joining me. This was a lot of fun. And hopefully we'll do this again, and maybe it'll be just as post-apocalyptic, or maybe it'll be a complete different diversion. So, and as always, we'll catch you on the next episode.